Stephen A., was the Eagles' offense that good or the Vikings' D just that bad?
Well, listen, I was at the game. I was on the field. It was a beautiful experience considering the fact that I rode in Philadelphia for 17 years. To see this city the way that it was something special to behold. Having said all of that, this was about the Minnesota defense being porous. I didn't recognize them. This was the #1 defense in the NFL, and they got destroyed. Make no mistake about it. It was an annihilation, the likes of which I did not expect to see. Nick Foles looked absolutely sensational, 352 yards, 26 of 33 passing. He just looked sublime. And then you look at the passes that he connected with. What do you got here? You got a 53-yard pass to Alshon Jeffrey, another 41 to Torrey Smith, another 42-1 to Nelson Aguilar. I mean, the Vikings had given up one pass, 40-plus yards all season long, and they gave up at least 3 yesterday afternoon, including a 36-yarder to Zach Ertz. I mean, all over the place they were getting picked apart. Doug Peterson had a great game plan. Seems to really have ingratiated himself to, Nick Foles rather into the offense and really adapted to what Nick Foles does best and utilized that strong arm of his. They were protecting him enough that he had time to throw the football. You had a combination of Jaye and LeGarrette Blount, even though LeGarrette Blount didn't have that many yards rushing, 1 yard for, one carry for the 11-yard touchdown run. He bulldozed through the Minnesota Vikings defense. These were all things that we didn't expect to see, and I thought it would come down to being a closer game where I said, okay, Case Keenum can't get it done in these hostile confines. What I didn't expect was for Minnesota's defense to get rattled as well and to wilt beneath that kind of hostility that the Philadelphia faithful and Lincoln Financial Field presented. So again, I expected the Eagles to win this game. I picked them to win this game, but I did not expect the Vikings defense to look this bad. They got ran over. They got steamrolled. They got embarrassed. And I think that it was epitomized in the end where Coach Mike Zimmer, he wouldn't even talk to the media after, when Fox and them were trying to talk to him after the game. He wouldn't talk to them. And by the way, as an aside, if that were Cam Newton or somebody, we'd be all over them. But somehow, some way, the coach, his responsibility in part is to talk after the game, and he went hiding. Go figure.
Well, Stephen A., you went out, over pretty thoroughly the Eagles' offense, and in fact, that is the answer. The Eagles' offense was that good. And let me say something. There are 2 reasons that the Eagles won that game. The 2 reasons were, one, once the defense got their confidence, which didn't happen right away. They got on the field. They were not confident early. Case Keenum and the Vikings took advantage. But once they got their confidence, those D-backs went to work. And there was just nothing for Case Keenum. There was nothing anywhere there for him on the field. And Chris Long early on with the turnover that resulted in the points, he was key, of course. But that defensive secondary was really something, and that was huge. And then the other thing was Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson simplified things for Nick Foles. And I got to take my hat off to Nick Foles after saying once Carson Wentz went down, and Ryan, you were on the show that day when we talked about are the Eagles cooked? I thought they were cooked. They would not advance in the playoffs, not win a single game in the playoffs, because I thought Nick Foles was terrible. I know he had that great season with, 27 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, something like that with Chip Kelly. But then once you saw him with Jeff Fisher, and apparently that was more Jeff Fisher than anything else. No one can succeed with that guy under center. But he was terrible, terrible. Not only was he terrible, he was also an empty calorie quarterback. So his numbers were bad, and then he was even worse than the numbers said they were. If you needed 8 yards, he'd get you 6. This was the kind of quarterback he's been. But Doug Peterson simplified things for him by reducing the reads. He didn't have to, once he simplified, and it wasn't about all his reads. They weren't doing crazy things they could do with Carson Wentz, sprinting right, whatever that is. It was just much simpler than Nick Foles was simply charged with making the quick read and delivering the ball. And he did that. He was able to get rid of the ball quickly, and he delivered it accurately, both on short passes, which he'd done in the previous playoff game, but also in this game down the field. And for that reason, the Eagles looked as good as they did. Yes, their defense was dominant, but their offense was excellent. You have to credit Nick Foles, but especially you have to credit Doug Peterson. He's not simply, a guy who made a nice environment for Carson Wentz that brought him along. This guy is an excellent head coach.